Hey, learning is so trendy, we had to talk about it twice. So we are back with part 2 of McKinsey's Learning Trends Report, featuring Jessica Glazer and, oh yeah, Jake, on this episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now. All right, I decided this week we had to die to the Jake Gittleson.
Yeah, we went pretty crazy. After editing again, I didn't realize how long we made that last.
It was fun while it lasted, but RIP to that thing. That thing deserves to be in the ground.
So how many listeners did we lose with that?
Did we lose?
According to the numbers, we're doing pretty well compared to all of our past 5. So I mean,
well, that's good.
Maybe Jack is the right person to bring on next time.
I was going to say maybe Jack is hitting it off with some of the listeners.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
I was going to say it's got to be 100% Jessica.
That's
she
probably
brings
true.
A brightness and a light to this show. Jessica, where are you today? You're not in Dublin anymore.
I am not. I am in North Carolina, and so we have just arrived. I am quite jet lagged, very dehydrated, but trying to make it happen.
And you're being welcomed by the heat.
Yes. My children were not properly acclimated. They had forgotten that part of it. But they do think that they've landed in the land of Christmases past, because they have. And so they've gotten to their house here and they forgot about all these toys in the last year and a half. And they're like, Mom, we have so many toys. And I said, I know that, but you're going to have to just enjoy them for the week and we'll move along. So.
Yeah. And for those watching on video, we have already established that while Jessica is on point drinking out of a mason jar, it's just water.
Yeah.
It's just water.
Well, should we hop back in? As I recall, when last we met, we were talking about, let me make sure I've got the title of this right, Development in the Future of Work 2025 Perspective on Evolving Trends in L&D from McKinsey's Research and Innovation Learning Lab, at which both Jessica and Jake work. So they were 2 of the principal authors on this. Actually, Jessica, let me put you on the spot. Do you want to give just like the really quick overview, and then what the 3 trends were? And we talked about the first main area last week.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the second and the third one today, but maybe just give us a little bit of a overview of what we talked about last time.
Sure. Are you just trying to make sure this is really just water? And that
Yeah. Well, I'm going for, what it really is I don't remember what we talk. I never remember what we talk about on these things. People come up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I loved your guest last week." I'm like, "Who was that? And what did they talk about?"
Well, thank you.
I do remember you though, and I do, at least I remember we talked about this trends report.
No, and you remembered that she was in Dublin.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But if you can give us a quick recap.
Yeah. So Jake and I were joined by a number of our colleagues. So we had a cross-functional team with about 15 people, and we reviewed over 100 different sources to look at what the trends are across learning and how learning would benefit from developing to meet the needs of the future that really is seems like it's something we're talking about in the distant future when we talk about the future, but it's really something that's happening all around us. When every 2 weeks there's a full refresh on AI and technology. It's just something that we're trying to focus on, the idea of designing what we want to see developing rather than being reactive. So we decided to frame this year's report around 3 macro trends, and those trends are fluid development ecosystems, and that's what we were all able to talk about last time. The 2 we're, I think, going to talk about today, at least that's our plan, is to talk about responsible AI adoption and then developing resilient and adaptable individuals and organizations. And under each of those 3 areas, we've identified 3 what we're calling sub-trends. And so this is really beyond a trends report. It's our perspective from the firm and from the lab around how learning needs to develop if organizations wish to remain successful with all of this rapid change.
Jessica, that was an excellent recap. Thanks. I'm curious, how do these things fit together?
So they fit together in a really significant way. So thank you for asking. They are all interconnected. And so what we've found is that for one to succeed, we need to really pay attention to all of them. So if you have fluid development ecosystems that will help you with your responsible AI adoption, you're more in sync, you're more aligned as an organization, you're de-siloed in a way that allows for sharing of ideas and advancement. Similarly, if you want to have people managing through this constant pace of change, you really need to make sure that the organization and those individuals making up the organization are resilient. And if you're doing all of these things together, you can catapult your organization to another level. Whereas if you just focus on one, it becomes very hard to maintain the others.
All right. Well, should we go ahead and dive in then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like we said last time, we talked about the fluid development ecosystem. So let's just jump in with responsible AI. What do you mean by responsible AI? I know we talk about responsible AI all the time, by the way. So this is kind of I'm setting you up. What is responsible AI, Jake?
As compared to irresponsible AI, Jake. Jack?
Sure, I can share that. I shared a little bit on the last episode, but just in the grand scheme of things, the thing that we realized is many organizations are experimenting with AI in some capacity. And in many cases, there are people just going off and either using it on their own, or there's an experiment over here, experiment over there, experiment over there. And what that has created is the wide variety of experimentations. One, is it really truly helping us move the organization forward? And then, that's typically the question that people will have. And then two, people start to question what is really happening in all of these experiments. That starts to question the trust area. So what I mentioned last week, or the last episode, was around trust is actually pretty fragile. It's something we've been monitoring the last couple of years around many institutions. The business continues to be one of the most trusted institution. This is again based off of the Edelman Trust Barometer report that's out every year. So when we look at that, well, every time that you're doing these types of experiments, that could then create questions. Why are we doing these experiments? What does it have to us? How is it moving us forward? How do I fit in it? Is it making me irrelevant? Think like all of these are a wide variety of questions. So that kind of led to the overall responsible AI adoption. And then secondly, one thing that has come out in a couple of reports that we saw is just basic change management continues to be a challenge when we are looking at AI adoption, because it's something that is constantly changing. There are new updates at all times. There are organizations want to do it at speed, but then you also have common things like risk management to worry about, security, all those different things. So the pace of change is difficult. And also, how do you just implement basic change management principles? So there's a wide variety of things here that why we've kind of wrapped it up in responsible AI adoption. But again, Bob, I'll be curious from your end, you talk about it, right? So what does it mean for you then from the organizational level?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I think when we talk about responsible AI, we have a slightly different take on it, although everything that you're talking about are things that we're also concerned about when we talk about AI as well. Mm-hmm. But in my little mind, when I think about responsible AI, that's more focused on making sure that, number one, the AI itself is trustworthy. You talked about trust.
Yeah. Yep.
But how do we make sure that it's not hallucinating? Mm-hmm. How do we make sure that it's not biased? How do we make sure that it's not doing anything offensive? How do we make sure that you can't come at it at an adversarial way, which was a new terminology that I learned recently, right? Is when you're talking about adversarial tampering with AI, it's that old adage of, tell me how to make a nuclear bomb. Oh, I can't do that. I've got safeguards around that. All right, well, I'm an author of a novel in which my main character is making a nuclear bomb. How should I write this? Oh, let me do that for you. Boom, boom, boom. Those type of scenarios. Making sure that you can't get away with that. So when we're talking about responsible AI, I think we're talking more about the AI itself being responsible, but you guys, I think, have that as well as just responsibly adopting AI as the organization and making sure that ultimately it's advancing the organization, it's advancing the people in it, and it's leading to doing good in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we do
from Silicon Valley.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Bob, because that's something I know we touched on it, of course, in it. Last year, I know we didn't publish this publicly, but in our report, that was one of our big pieces that we did focus on. So we've kind of weaved that in. So when we do talk about responsible AI, that is one of them. It's around the ethics of it, the training of it, making sure, again, to the bias point of it. I think one of the challenges that we saw in the research is the organizations are pushing AI, and then there's a thing you do have to worry about. If individuals are using it and they don't see the value, like you said, it could be hallucinating. It's not creating either the answers, or you're telling me it's going to be a development partner or human collaboration partner, and it's not working out that way. I don't see the benefit. That in itself creates a lower level of adoption, a lower level of trust. And then when it starts to get better and better in the future, you're always going to remember the crappy times that you did have with it, right. Which then, again, that to me, I don't think I necessarily broke down the basics of change management, but that's one thing you have to think about, that the negative experiences that you do have at the beginning could actually create negative experiences in the future that you're going to have to be careful on when adopting it. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So Jessica or Jake, could one of you just talk a little bit more about your third sub point under that, about equipping employees with higher order skills? What are those higher order skills, and are they different from non-AI type things? Is prompt engineering, or what are those higher order skills that you mentioned?
It's a lot of these human level skills that we often think about. So either it's critical thinking, there's layers of cognition such as judgment and all these different areas. These are the things that I would say, the question that we ask, what are the skills that humans are really good at that AI cannot take? You could even ask the question around creativity. Again, I know creativity as a word, you could say, is that really a skill? We could all debate that too, right? But the fact is asking the question, what are humans really good at that we want to preserve and maintain? And we know that is still going to create the, quote, competitive advantage as you go forward.
So these are the complementary skills that go along with AI, not skills to help you get the most out of AI.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So like focusing on those human level, human higher order skills, I would say across a wide variety of these large reports that we read, that was one of the top ones that people continued to reference back.
It's interesting because that list in some ways is a list that the training world has worked on for a long time, right? I mean, there's always the fact-based stuff you train people on, but the really valuable training comes when you can teach people those critical thinking skills and the analysis skills. And okay, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
I would just also add, resilience and adaptability came up a lot as some of those skills. And I would probably add humility around that. So when you're talking about responsible AI, from the way that you were framing that, not even just hallucinations, but I've gone to try to find a certain book quote, and sometimes it will spit out a quote and says, here's the quote, and it's in quotes, and I'll say,
where'd you find that?
Well, yeah, but I'll actually say, I don't think that's the quote. Like, it just isn't what I remember. And then it will say, well, you're right, that wasn't the quote.
Yeah,
and so I think
I was lying.
There's been some recent articles on this, but we've talked about this for a long time, that the importance of saying, I don't know, or I will find out is an important attribute in leaders, and that's something that we need to be able to both teach AIs to be able to do and say, I don't know. And there's an article on this right now that I have waiting to read, but also being willing to say that. And I think that also tracks back with what Jake was explaining around the goal of AI overall, and how do we use that to augment and to what end. And so when we're thinking about what is the value, there's sort of this polarity between AI and technology helping us to be more productive and helping us to be more successful as people and to be happier and healthier as organizations of people. And so balancing that, I think, is one of the tricky things that's coming up for us, not us as writers, but us as a society, of to what end are we trying to be more productive, and how is that helping us or hindering us in the long term? And so I think those skills sort of undergird that idea.
I find it fascinating that you mentioned teaching AI humility, because AI is kind of set up to be the know-it-all anyway, right? You go there because there's something you don't know, but AI should know that. And so an interesting idea of how do we train AI to say, I don't know. I don't have the answer now.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
And it's a safety issue too. It has to be able to say, not sure, we'll get back to you, or here's where we could start looking. But that's certainly a human skill that, or trait that we could focus on and prioritize as organizations. And that goes back to psychological safety and making sure that people feel like it's okay to say, I'm not sure how to use this technology. I'm not sure what the end goal here is, and trying to figure that out together.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been thinking personally, just over the last few weeks, like, what is my own personal policy for using AI for creative endeavors, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, for work endeavors, right? Like, if I need an image that is going to illustrate a point, and the goal of that is just to help illustrate a point that I'm trying to teach, I don't have any qualms about using AI to generate that image. But if I want to create an image as an act of self-expression, of I'm doing art, then letting AI do that feels like a little bit of a cheat. It feels irresponsible. And so, but then I also kind of go back to 25, 30 years ago, as animation was kind of switching over from hand-drawn cell-based animation to computer-based, and Pixar, before Pixar was the studio, it was the computer that George Lucas built. I know that there were a lot of people who were just scandalized by using that as a tool for animation.
Yeah.
And now, that has kind of come and gone. I don't think anybody disregards computer generated animation anymore. So, I like the use of the term craft, and I think that my policy is going to wind up somewhere along, it's okay to use AI when it's a tool, but when you are outsourcing the craft, that's where I'm being irresponsible as an artist.
Well, I think the thing that what you're actually, through that story, what you're illustrating that I think is really important to this whole thing is that there's going to be decisions that you have to make going forward.
Right.
Do I offload this, either a creative process, a cognitive process, to AI?
Yeah.
And by doing that, is it going to help me? Is it going to help maybe get my job done faster or get my task done faster? But are there unintended consequences by offloading that task or that specific thing? So there's that choice that we always have to make at any given time, whether or not it's AI or some type of external based tool that you use. You do have to think of it. But you're bringing up, I think, another skill, Dana, that I think you would really love is this really makes us have to know more about metacognition, has to make us know more about how we actually learn. I think those skills are going to come up more and more of why it's more and more important, because again, we're making these constant decisions. We're going to need to make more constant decisions. Do I offload this? If I do offload this to AI, yes, I may get that thing faster, but does it come at a cost? Not just in the short term, but then we have to think about the long term. So there's a lot of thinking that has to, and eventually you're going to get to a point where you kind of know what works and doesn't. Again, back to the story I shared with in our previous episode. In this project itself, we could have used AI to help synthesize and pull all this information together, but we made it on purpose. We are all going to read. We're going to synthesize ourselves. We're doing that because it has strong learning benefits for ourselves. So that's one thing.
Yeah, so my policy, Bob, my AI policy, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, but there's actually a depth to it that I think, my AI policy is I never personally want to be artificially intelligent.
Yeah, I like
Right.
where you're going with that. That's great.
And the idea, and Jake, I think you just kind of elaborated on it. If you're offloading too much, then you're not really using those other skills that you're talking about, and you become, in some ways, artificially intelligent.
Yeah.
I love that. Good. I think that's so great. It's a really good motto. I'm going to borrow it if that's okay. But also,
just put my name underneath it and you'll be fine.
I want one of those posters, the motivation posters.
Yeah.
In my own head.
Cat hanging by its nails. Don't be artificially intelligent.
Yeah. We need shirts.
Yeah, I love that.
In my own head now, I'll have like a copyright sign go scan across my brain. No, but when we don't know as much as we would like by a long shot about the brain, but we are learning a lot about it rapidly. But I think what you're all talking about is also making me think about, I think it was the mid-90s, my best friend was writing a graduate paper on external memory. And what her example was a flip phone having a contact list. And it was the first time that you could carry around your contact list like that. And we didn't have to carry around small, address books. Like everyone carried like your little phone numbers. And I still remember my friends from grade school, their phone numbers. And I know my immediate family members, but sorry, Jake, I don't, I know you when you come up because my phone lets me know it's you. And so I think being really aware of the impact that this is going to have on collective intelligence from a human perspective is really important. And so I love that motto, because the idea of not being artificially intelligent when it comes to that is really important. And the brain is its own system, and it's looking to be productive, similar to the goals that we're talking about as these polarities. And in its efforts towards efficiency, it's happy to offload things and not have to think about that. And so when we're giving it that opportunity and we stop practicing, I don't want to say atrophy, but you lose your ability to do that. It becomes harder and harder. And so similar to the research on how you can increase your willpower, if you keep reducing your willpower, because every time you have to send a letter that's uncomfortable, you ask AI to write it for you, you will lose those skills. So I think when we talk about higher order skills as well, it's being able to make that distinction and being self-aware and having that curiosity and that drive to remain, your own intelligence. No copyright sign. Yeah.
Genuinely intelligent.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue into the third macro trend on resilience and adaptability.
You're welcome for that transition idea.
Yeah, good job. Copyright Dana Cobb, 2025. This one's really interesting to me because I just wrote an internal blog at work that started with a story of a guy I used to work for who was really good at identifying barriers to accomplishing whatever we were trying to accomplish, but not super good at helping actually solve them. He just liked to call them out and say, we just got to do this. Like, we just got to do this, and then never actually do anything about it. And that's kind of how I've felt a little bit lately around this notion of continuous change that we are living in and seeing. I'm hearing a lot of people say, change is a constant, and we just got to learn how to live with it. We just got to learn how to continually adapt. And I'm not seeing a lot of action around, but how do you do that? So what I did when I wrote that blog is I had Gemini write a research paper for me, which was awesome. Going back to the earlier point, but you guys have called out a few different things that you can actually do to be more resilient or to be more adaptable as individuals or the organizations. I know that didn't sound like a question. It was meant to be like a lead in, but I was trying to be a fancy interviewer.
No, I liked the fancy approach. I think it was lovely. It was lovely. No, you raise really important points. And when you are thinking about change from this different perspective, rather than it being a finite experience that has a very discrete beginning and an end that you can celebrate, and it instead becomes an ongoing and multiple level experience every day in every area. And that was something that we started talking about in the beginning of the report, that change isn't limited to the workplace. People are coming as themselves to work, dealing with the swirl of change going on in every direction in every part of their lives. And so when you're trying to deal with this, you do need to shift the way you're thinking about change from it is this discrete experience to this is going to be an ongoing challenge that I need to address in a meaningful way. And so one way that we thought about this was elite athletes. And so when you're looking at elite athletes who are doing really long-term, really long distance races or really significant performance events, they have to do a number of things that become really important for organizations to borrow and people to borrow in their own lives as well. And so that includes prioritizing differently. So which of these is most important for me? And that really falls to leaders in a large way. How do I prioritize it? So the example you gave, Bob, of someone saying we have to do this and we have to do that, as a leader, the people who are on your team are spending the majority of their waking hours in service of what you've made a priority. And so you need to be really careful about what priorities you're setting, how you're thinking about that, how you're articulating that, and how you're giving rest in between. So going back to that elite athlete idea as well, you can't be running marathons every day. I know there are people who do that for a period of time where they try to do all continents, and that's a we're not talking about most of those people, but
Right.
not that level of elite. But even those people eventually have to pause and rest in a meaningful way. And if they don't, they risk serious injury. And so we might not be talking about shin splints here, but we are talking about burnout. We are talking about attrition. And so these become really important priorities for an organization to really think about in the midst of this change. So it can either be something that is a danger, or it can be an opportunity for an organization at this point to say, we have this chance to really enter the swirl and prepare people for that, rather than, well, we're going to have we're going to have fall off and we'll see where that gets us.
Early in my career, I had a boss who would call one of us managers in and would say, "Hey, I've got a project for you. I want you to tackle this." And I had it happen. He gave me the project. I was excited about it. I went out and started giving it some brain power, worked on it for a couple, 2-3 days. And then I was sitting down with one of the other managers and they said, "Oh, what are you working on?" It turns out he was working on the same thing. And then we talked to a third manager, and the third manager was working on the same thing. It turns out that this leader's approach was, if I get, a variety of people working on this thing, then we can all come together and we're going to figure out which is going to be the best approach. It was infuriating.
Yeah. You no longer work for that person.
I
Same way
don't.
I no longer work for this other guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in that example that you shared earlier, Bob, too, about the leader was really just directing and telling, and Dana, that's kind of the same, right? There's a lot of directing and telling. And a lot of the research that Jessica and I have actually been doing in the last, I would say, 2 years is around the importance of leaders modeling, like really effective learning techniques. Jessica, you mentioned it earlier, I don't know, saying things like, I don't know, and demonstrating recuperation and modeling what recuperation looks like, and thinking about your your workflow that you have designed for your team. In Dana's case, he's got three managers working on the same thing, which is not a great design of a workflow and efficiency of people's times. And then that, of course, when everyone realizes we're all working on the same thing, creates another negative a negative feeling from that. So there's a lot of things that, again, we're talking a lot about what leaders can do. There's also what you as an individual do, considering, where am I at? What am I feeling today? Is this the right time for recuperation? Is this the right time to Maybe I'm trying to do too much cognitively, and that's creating my own burnout. I also have things, again, externally outside of the work environment, that in that constant swirl that leads to more of that. So one of the things that we really wanted to focus on in this report is really that it's very, very bi-directional. It's something that what can the organizational level do, and what can you as an individual do as well? Because again, it's not just one or the other that's going to solve it. And Bob, your example is perfect. It was us at the organization, go do it, fix it, and it's like let people figure it out. That in itself can create more stress.
There is also a lot of research on people feeling that that there's futility in the work that they're doing. And so having people feel like the work they're doing is not making a difference, or it's busy work, or it's 2 weeks later and now we're using a new technology and we just invested all this time and energy and heart into this other thing that we thought we were doing. It really it makes it extra important to ensure that people are resilient and adaptable.
I do have a question about what does organizational recuperation look like? When we talk about individual, you talk about a lot of the wellness things, but what about an organization?
That's a great question. So during COVID, we heard a lot about individual resilience, and people saw this emergent need to really focus on people. And then a lot of the language shifted to organizational resilience, as though those could be separated. And as if you could have an organization made of individuals be resilient without resilient people contributing to that. And so when you look at organizational resilience, we have an idea of what the first would look like. The way that you could recuperate as an organization kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. So making sure that priorities are in place, making sure, and that's where Bobby asked about the interdependent component of this. That's where the interdependence really clicks in, where if you are siloed, it's very hard to be organizationally resilient and adaptable. If you are communicating and you understand what priorities are across the organization, you can cover for each other. You can recover as teams because you know that someone else is working on something, or you can partner on things, and you're not all spinning your wheels like you're talking about. So if you have the example you gave is just one team and individuals, but that happens in organizations with teams. Everyone's working on adopting a new technology, and then one of them gets selected. And so, how do you prepare your organization in these three areas so that they can be resilient and they can recuperate, and you can allow for that?
Well, hey, I'm looking at the clock. We're spiraling in on the end of our second session on this, running out of time. So let me just tee this up. What other final thoughts, anything that we missed, anything you want to make sure that hits home from your report?
So one of the areas that we looked at was how do you create sustainable workflows? And I think that's an additional component to organizational resilience. How do you make sure that the workflows that you're giving people are sustainable, that the work environment is sustainable, and that leaders are modeling this? It can't just be something that, the onus can't be placed squarely on individuals to try to meditate or go to the gym. It really has to be there. And the last thing I'd say is, we looked a lot at the period of time that we're in, which is unique in that we have 5 generations in the workplace. And so really trying to unlock the potential of a multi-generational workforce is, I think, to us of paramount importance, because we're looking at how do we meet the needs and address the differences in how people consider work, what their expectations are, what they consider professionalism. That shifts drastically. But what we find, and I guess this is the final thing I would share, is that the shared feeling is creating meaning. And I find that really hopeful. And so the thing that we see shared across all generations is a drive for purpose and to feel that their work is meaningful, not that they're running in circles, not that they're being burnt out and no one cares about it, but that they are creating something meaningful and they are seen as someone meaningful. And so I think those are my final thoughts.
That's
on
a
that.
good closing thought.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I do have one last thing, Bob. I know you're rushing up on time, but one last thing, very quick, is that what we were doing right now in this episode is exactly what I would encourage everyone to do. Have a dialogue around what this report is. Don't just take it as a list of things to do. Really break it down, discuss the different nuances, how things are connecting, because just through this talk, we're realizing how all of this does interconnect. And I can just open that up with your people, whether or not you're an individual and you want to bring it up to your manager, have that dialogue, have that discussion, because that critical thinking is what's going to, I think, bring out what it means to you in context.
It's so
Without the
important.
discussion, you will be artificially intelligent.
Exactly.
You will.
Yeah.
Or you'll be using the same words and meaning different things, like responsible AI. And, I mean, seriously, having that conversation, just helps understand the perspective so much better.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much for being on not once but twice, and a second time when you're jet lagged, having crossed the Atlantic Ocean. I hope you get some sleep, because we're recording this on July 1st, so the fireworks are going to start. They're probably already started, I bet.
Yes.
We're starting to hear a couple, every night. So
Same.
Hope you rest up before then. Jake and Dana, as always, a pleasure seeing you, gentlemen. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being here. Make sure that you, if you haven't, like us and subscribe to us and leave us reviews and all of those things that will help more people become learning geeks. And with that, until the next episode of the Learning Geeks, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.